The delivery driver grabbed me, saying, "Your husband collapsed at work. They need you immediately." The moment I opened the door, he grabbed my arm with hands that felt like steel clamps. "Ma'am, your husband Daniel collapsed at the construction site. They're doing CPR right now. The paramedics said to bring you immediately because he keeps asking for you." His grip tightened when I tried to step back. "Every second counts. We need to go now." Something in his voice made my blood turn cold. This wasn't the gentle urgency of someone trying to help. This was controlled desperation, like a predator who'd been hunting and finally cornered his prey. "Wait, let me get my purse," I said, but he was already pulling me toward his delivery truck. "No time," he said. "They said he might not make it if you don't come right now." My bare feet scraped against the concrete driveway as he dragged me forward. "I need shoes," I protested, but he lifted me off the ground and practically threw me into the passenger seat. The truck smelled like cigarettes and something metallic that made my stomach turn. As he ran around to the driver's side, I noticed his uniform didn't have a company logo, just generic brown fabric that looked like a costume. The truck lurched forward before I'd even closed the door, tires squealing as we pulled out of my quiet suburban neighborhood. "Which hospital?" I asked, fumbling for the seatbelt with shaking hands. "Where are they taking him?" The man glanced at me in the rearview mirror, and I caught something predatory in his dark eyes. "Not hospital yet. They're stabilizing him on site first. Construction accidents are tricky. Can't move him until they know what's broken." He took a sharp left turn that threw me against the door, and I realized we were heading away from town instead of toward it. "What's your name?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The man's hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles going white. "Kevin," he said after a pause. "I've been delivering to that site for months. Know all the guys there." But when I asked him which construction company Daniel worked for, Kevin said Brookfield Construction. Daniel worked for Morrison Building. He'd been there for 3 years, and I knew the name of every supervisor and most of his coworkers. There was no Brookfield Construction in our area. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out with trembling fingers. A text from an unknown number. "Your husband is safe. Do exactly what Kevin tells you, or he won't stay that way." The message included a photo of Daniel bound to a chair in what looked like a warehouse, his mouth covered with duct tape and his eyes wide with terror. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, and his work shirt was torn. Kevin watched me read the message in the rearview mirror, a thin smile spreading across his face. "Now you understand," Kevin said, his voice completely different now, colder, more controlled. "Your husband owes some very serious people a lot of money, $53,000 to be exact, plus interest that's been piling up for months." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick manila folder, tossing it onto my lap. Inside were photographs of Daniel at casino poker tables, signing papers at payday loan offices, meeting with men in expensive suits in parking lots behind restaurants. The photos were date-stamped going back almost a year. "Daniel doesn't gamble," I whispered. But even as I said it, I was remembering things that hadn't made sense at the time. The late nights he'd explained as overtime work, the cash withdrawals from our checking account that he'd blamed on car repairs, the new credit cards that arrived in the mail addressed to him, cards he'd said were identity theft attempts. I'd believed every lie because the alternative that my husband was living a double life had been unthinkable. Kevin pulled the truck into an abandoned shopping center and parked behind a boarded-up restaurant. "He's been using your house as collateral," he continued, showing me loan documents with what appeared to be my signature at the bottom. "Forged your name real nice. My boss doesn't care about the technicalities, he just wants his money. Daniel promised it would be settled by today, but when we went to collect this morning, he'd already called in sick to work. Seemed like he might be planning to disappear on us." The second truck arrived 5 minutes later, a black SUV with tinted windows that screamed organized crime. 2 men got out, both wearing expensive suits that didn't match the rundown neighborhood. The older one was maybe 50, with graying hair and the kind of calm demeanor that made him more frightening than someone who shouted and threatened. The younger one looked like he could bench press a car, his neck thick with muscle and his hands scarred across the knuckles. "Mrs. Crawford," the older man said, sliding into the driver's seat as Kevin moved to the back. "I'm Ray Fulton. Your husband owes me a substantial amount of money, and frankly, I'm tired of his creative payment schedules." He opened a laptop computer and showed me a spreadsheet with dozens of names, amounts, and payment statuses. Daniel's name was near the top with $53,847.33 in red letters beside it. Other names had notes like paid in full, or collection complete, or, ominously, account closed. "This is a business," Ray explained, his voice as calm as if he were discussing insurance policies. "We provide high-risk loans to people who can't get credit through traditional channels. The interest rates reflect the risk involved, and the collection methods reflect the clientele we serve." Daniel understood these terms when he borrowed from us. What he apparently didn't understand was that defaulting on payment would put his family at risk as well. The muscle-bound man, who Ray introduced as Tommy, opened a second laptop and showed me surveillance footage of my daily routine. Videos of me leaving for work, grocery shopping, going to the gym, having lunch with my sister. They'd been watching me for weeks, learning my schedule, planning this moment. "We prefer negotiation to violence," Ray said. "But we need leverage to ensure Daniel takes his obligations seriously." "You're that leverage." "What do you want?" I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. Ray closed both laptops and leaned back in his seat. "Daniel has disappeared, but he'll surface eventually. Men like him always do. They can't resist contacting their wives to apologize and make promises they won't keep. When he calls you, you're going to convince him to pay what he owes. Every penny, plus penalties for wasting our time." Tommy handed Ray a professional-looking camera, the kind used for insurance documentation or crime scene photography. "We're going to take some pictures," Ray explained. "Nothing inappropriate, just evidence that you're our guest and that your continued well-being depends on Daniel's cooperation." Kevin will deliver the photos personally, along with very specific instructions about payment methods and deadlines. They photographed me from every angle, making sure my face was clearly visible and my distress was obvious. Tommy directed me like I was a model in some horrific photo shoot, telling me to look scared, to hold up today's newspaper, to mouth words like, "Help me," for the camera. The whole process felt surreal and violating, like they were documenting my terror for some sick collection album. After the photos, they moved me to the SUV for what Ray called a change of venue. We drove deeper into the industrial district, past abandoned factories and empty lots where the only witnesses would be homeless people who wouldn't talk to police. The building they took me to looked like an old automotive repair shop, with garage doors and oil stains on the concrete floor. But inside, it had been converted into something resembling an office, complete with desks, filing cabinets, and a small kitchen area. "Make yourself comfortable," Ray said, gesturing toward a leather couch that looked like it had been salvaged from someone's basement. "This might take a while." Daniel's not answering his phone, and according to his work, he called in sick this morning. Seems like he might be hiding from his responsibilities. The couch faced a wall-mounted television that was tuned to local news. I realized they wanted me to see how normal the world looked while I was trapped in this nightmare. Tommy disappeared through a door marked private, while Ray settled behind one of the desks with his laptop. He made phone calls in coded language about collections and customer relations and asset recovery. Other people were apparently involved in this operation. People with titles like accounts manager and field supervisor. This wasn't some small-time loan sharking operation. This was a business with hierarchy and procedures and enough resources to kidnap someone in broad daylight. Hours passed with no word from Daniel. Ray made periodic phone calls to people he called associates, updating them on the situation and receiving instructions from someone higher up the chain. Kevin brought me a sandwich and a bottle of water, treating me like a long-term guest instead of a kidnapping victim. "Boss says you might be here a while," he explained, setting the food on a table beside the couch. Daniel's being real creative about avoiding his responsibilities. Around 3 o'clock, Ray's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it, and his expression darkened. "Interesting development," he said, turning the screen toward me. "Your husband checked himself into a gambling addiction treatment center in Nevada this morning. Desert Springs Recovery, 30-day program." He showed me the facility's website with Daniel's name on the patient roster. Very convenient timing. Files for treatment the same day his debt comes due. I stared at the screen in disbelief. While I'd been terrified about his supposed construction accident, Daniel had been boarding a plane to Las Vegas to check himself into rehab. He'd planned his escape perfectly, getting out of town before his creditors came looking and leaving me to face the consequences of his actions. "How long have you known?" I asked. Ray checked his watch. "About 10 minutes. My associate in Nevada confirmed Daniel's location through the facility's billing department." "So what happens to me?" I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. Ray closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. "That depends on Daniel. We've sent him a message through the treatment center explaining that his wife's safety depends on his immediate cooperation in settling his account. If he can arrange payment from Nevada, you go home tonight. If he decides to hide behind his recovery program, well, we'll have to explore other options for collecting what we're owed." Tommy came back through the private door carrying what looked like medical supplies. A blood pressure cuff, thermometer, small vials of clear liquid. "Just in case Daniel needs more motivation," Ray explained casually. "Some people don't take our communications seriously until they understand the full range of consequences." He gestured to Tommy, who started setting up the medical equipment on a nearby table. "Don't worry, Mrs. Crawford. Tommy has extensive first aid training. Very professional." My phone rang around 4 o'clock, and Ray answered it himself. "Daniel," he said pleasantly. "So good to hear from you. Yes, your wife is here with us. She's been asking about you." He listened for a few minutes, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. "I understand you're dealing with some personal issues, but business is business. Your problems don't make my money disappear." More listening. "No, I don't think 30 days is reasonable. This situation requires immediate resolution." Ray handed me the phone. "Your husband wants to speak with you. 5 minutes to convince him that cooperation is in everyone's best interest." I took the phone with trembling hands. "Daniel?" I said. "Oh God. Rachel, are you okay? They said they had you, but I wasn't sure if you were hurt or—" "I'm fine," I interrupted. "For now. But Daniel, what the hell is going on? These people have surveillance footage of me, loan documents with my forged signature. How could you do this to us?" There was silence on the other end. Then Daniel started crying. "I'm so sorry, Rachel. It started small. Just a few bets here and there to blow off steam after work. Then I started winning, and it felt like I could solve all our money problems. When I started losing, I thought I could win it back if I just played a little longer with a little more money." His voice broke completely. "I never meant for it to get this bad. I never meant to put you in danger." "But you did put me in danger," I said, looking at Ray and Tommy who were listening to every word. "And now I'm sitting in some warehouse with people who want $50,000 we don't have." Daniel's breathing was ragged on the other end of the line. I know. I came here to get clean so I could think straight and figure out a way to fix this. I can get a loan against my retirement account, maybe borrow from my brother. Just give me 48 hours. Ray held up his hand, indicating my time was almost up. "Daniel, listen to me carefully. These people are not playing games. They have medical equipment here, and they're talking about consequences if you don't cooperate. Do you understand what that means?" "Yes," Daniel whispered. "Rachel, I love you. I'm going to make this right. I promise." Ray took the phone back before I could say goodbye. 48 hours, Daniel. Not 49, not 50. 48 hours exactly. Or we start exploring those consequences I mentioned. After Ray ended the call, he made several more phone calls to people he addressed as doctor and counselor. I realized he was setting up additional pressure on Daniel through the treatment facility staff. Your husband's addiction counselor is very concerned about his wife's well-being, Ray said with mock sympathy. Apparently, family stress can trigger relapse in recovering addicts. We wouldn't want Daniel to have a setback in his treatment. Tommy brought me dinner from a nearby restaurant. Actual restaurant food served on real plates with metal silverware. The normalcy of it was more disturbing than if they'd given me prison food on paper plates. They were treating this like a business dinner, complete with professional courtesy and small talk about the weather. You're handling this very well, Ray commented. Most wives become hysterical. But you seem to understand that this is just business, nothing personal. Nothing personal, I said. You kidnapped me from my own home. Ray shook his head. We provided emergency transportation when your husband collapsed. The fact that he wasn't actually at a construction site is unfortunate, but not our fault. You're here voluntarily, helping us locate your missing husband so we can resolve his debt obligations. Very civic-minded of you. The way he twisted the narrative was chilling. In his version, I was a helpful spouse assisting with a business matter, not a kidnapping victim. The first night was the longest of my life. They'd set up a cot in what had once been the office break room, with a thin mattress and scratchy blankets that smelled like they'd been stored in someone's garage. Tommy sat outside the door all night, occasionally checking on me like I was a patient in a hospital instead of a prisoner. Ray worked late at his desk, making phone calls to people in different time zones about various collection matters. Around 3 a.m., I heard Ray talking to someone about the Crawford situation. He mentioned sending photos to Daniel's treatment counselor, his brother, his elderly parents. Family pressure is very effective, Ray said. Most debtors will do anything to protect their relatives from embarrassment. I realized they were weaponizing Daniel's addiction recovery, using his vulnerability against him when he was trying to get clean. The next morning brought new complications. Kevin arrived with newspapers and pointed to a small article buried on page 6. Local woman missing after husband's workplace accident. The story mentioned that I hadn't returned home the night before and that police were investigating my disappearance in connection with Daniel's medical emergency. My sister had called the police when I didn't answer my phone, and they'd found evidence of the emergency at our house. This is a problem, Ray said, reading the article. Police involvement complicates our business relationship. He made several phone calls, speaking in increasingly urgent tones to people about containment and narrative control. Within an hour, Kevin returned with another man I hadn't seen before, someone Ray introduced as our media consultant. This operation was sophisticated enough to have a public relations specialist. The media consultant, a thin man in an expensive suit who introduced himself only as Mr. Park, spread newspapers across Ray's desk. The story is small now, but it could grow if we're not careful, he explained. We need to provide law enforcement with a plausible explanation for Mrs. Crawford's absence that doesn't involve our business operations. He opened a laptop and showed me social media profiles for women who'd apparently disappeared voluntarily. Marital stress, financial problems, depression, addiction, very common reasons for someone to leave home without notice. You want me to lie to the police, I said. Mr. Park shook his head. We want you to provide context for your temporary absence. Your husband has gambling problems. Your marriage is struggling. You needed time to think. Very relatable situation that explains why you might not go home immediately. Ray nodded approvingly. Much better than trying to explain why you were helping us with a business matter that some people might misunderstand. My phone had been buzzing constantly with calls from my sister, my mother, coworkers, and numbers I didn't recognize that were probably reporters or police. Ray finally answered it himself, putting it on speaker so I could hear. Mrs. Crawford is safe, he said in a professional voice. She's dealing with some personal matters related to her husband's medical situation and needs privacy right now. The caller identified herself as Detective Maria Santos from the Missing Persons Unit. I need to speak with Mrs. Crawford directly, Detective Santos said. Ray nodded to me and mouthed the words personal matters, while pointing at a script Mr. Park had written on a notepad. I cleared my throat and tried to sound normal. Detective Santos, this is Rachel Crawford. I'm okay, just dealing with some family issues right now. My voice was shaking, but I hoped she'd attribute it to stress about Daniel's supposed medical emergency. Mrs. Crawford, where are you right now? Detective Santos asked. Your neighbors saw you leave with a delivery driver yesterday, and there's no record of your husband being admitted to any local hospital. I looked at Ray, who held up the notepad with more scripted responses. I'm staying with friends while Daniel gets treatment for his gambling addiction. The medical emergency was actually a panic attack related to his debts. I needed time to process everything before going home. Detective Santos was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Crawford, are you in a safe place? Are you free to leave if you want to? Ray's expression hardened, and Tommy moved closer to the phone. Yes, I said, the lie burning in my throat. I'm safe. I just need some time to figure out what to do about my marriage. Daniel's been lying to me for months about gambling, and I found out yesterday that he's been forging my signature on loan documents. I needed space to think. After Detective Santos hung up, Mr. Park seemed pleased with my performance. Very believable, he said. Marital problems are much easier for law enforcement to understand than complex business arrangements. They'll probably close the missing person case within 24 hours. Ray looked less satisfied. Police attention is still police attention. We need to resolve this situation quickly before someone starts asking the wrong questions. Daniel called again that afternoon, and this time he sounded different, more desperate, more frightened. Rachel, I've been getting calls from the treatment center. They say people have been asking about me, sending photos to my counselors. What's happening? I explained about the police investigation, the missing person report, the pressure Ray was putting on his recovery program. They're not just threatening me, Daniel. They're trying to sabotage your treatment. I'm working on the money, Daniel said, his voice cracking. My brother said he can lend me $15,000, and I'm trying to get a hardship withdrawal from my 401k for the rest. But these things take time, and they want everything in 48 hours. Ray took the phone from me and spoke directly to Daniel. Time is a luxury you can't afford. Your wife's situation becomes more complicated every hour this drags on. Police are asking questions, reporters are calling. Soon this becomes a public matter instead of a private business arrangement. What if I can get you $30,000 by tomorrow? Daniel asked. Partial payment with a schedule for the rest. Ray was quiet for a long moment, consulting his laptop and making calculations. $30,000 tomorrow, then $5,000 monthly for 6 months, plus interest, of course. That brings the total to $67,000. The interest alone would cost us more than Daniel's original debt, but we didn't have any choice. Deal, Daniel said immediately. After the call, Ray seemed more relaxed. Your husband is finally taking this seriously, he said. Nothing motivates a man like knowing his wife's safety depends on his financial responsibility. Tommy started packing up the medical equipment and Mr. Park closed his laptop. You'll be home tomorrow evening, Mrs. Crawford. I trust you understand the importance of discretion about our business relationship. But morning brought new complications. Kevin arrived looking panicked, carrying newspapers and his phone. We've got a problem, he said, spreading the papers on Ray's desk. The story had grown from a small missing person notice to a front-page article. Local woman's disappearance linked to husband's gambling debts. Someone had talked to reporters about Daniel's addiction and the forged loan documents. Now my kidnapping was being treated as a potential organized crime story. Who leaked this? Ray demanded, his calm demeanor cracking for the first time. Mr. Park was already on his phone, trying to do damage control with various media contacts. This changes everything, Ray said, pacing around the office. We can't return Mrs. Crawford now without it looking like we released a kidnapping victim, but we can't keep her without confirming every detail in these newspaper stories. My phone was buzzing constantly with calls from reporters, and Ray finally turned it off completely. Your husband's gambling problem just became a public relations nightmare, he said. Every detail about his debts, the forged signatures, the treatment center, it's all in the newspaper. Someone very close to this situation has been talking to journalists. I realized Daniel might have contacted reporters himself, thinking media pressure would force his creditors to release me. Ray made a series of increasingly angry phone calls to people he called management and legal counsel. I gathered that his organization was not accustomed to this level of public scrutiny, and that my case was becoming too high profile for their usual operating procedures. We need an exit strategy, Ray told Tommy. Something that protects our interests while resolving the immediate situation. Mr. Park presented several options, none of them good for me. They could claim I'd been staying with them voluntarily as a guest, which would make me complicit in covering up the kidnapping. They could stage my escape and let me return home with a story about being held by unknown criminals. Or they could arrange for me to disappear permanently, making it look like I'd fled to avoid the shame of Daniel's public gambling scandal. The third option is cleanest from a business perspective, Ray said, reviewing Mr. Park's analysis. No witnesses, no testimony, no ongoing complications. Mrs. Crawford becomes another casualty of her husband's poor decisions. Tommy nodded agreement, but Kevin looked uncomfortable. That seems extreme, Kevin said. She's been cooperative. Why not just let her go with a story about escaping? Ray pulled up news footage on his laptop showing reporters outside our house, interviewing neighbors about Daniel's gambling and our marriage problems. Because she's seen too much and heard too much. Our names, our faces, our procedures. Even if she wanted to stay quiet, law enforcement would pressure her for details. Eventually, she'd cooperate with their investigation. I realized I was listening to them plan my murder as casually as they'd planned my kidnapping. There is a fourth option, Mr. Park said quietly. Mrs. Crawford could become part of our organization. Someone with her background and education could be useful for our legitimate business operations. Voluntary employment would explain her current location and provide long-term security for our interests. Ray looked intrigued. What kind of work? Mr. Park consulted his notes. Accounting, customer relations, administrative support. Many of our clients appreciate dealing with someone who understands their situation personally. I felt sick realizing they were offering me a job working for the people who'd kidnapped me, using my own trauma as qualification for helping them victimize other families. I won't do it, I said. You can't make me work for you. Ray smiled coldly. Mrs. Crawford, you misunderstand. We're offering you a career opportunity that allows you to stay alive and support your husband through his recovery. The alternative is much less attractive. Tommy showed me personnel files for other people who'd apparently joined the organization under similar circumstances. Wives of debtors, family members of people who'd defaulted on loans, individuals who'd been recruited after witnessing too much of the business operations. It's not a bad life, Tommy explained. Good salary, health benefits, retirement plan. Much better than being a casualty of your husband's gambling problem. Daniel called again that evening, frantic because the news coverage had made it impossible for him to get a loan against his retirement account. The bank says they can't process hardship withdrawals for people involved in ongoing criminal investigations, he said. My brother is backing out of lending me money because he doesn't want to be connected to organized crime. I'm trying, Rachel, but the media attention is making everything impossible. Ray took the phone and explained the new situation to Daniel. Your wife has become a public figure, Mr. Crawford. Her disappearance is front-page news, and law enforcement is treating this as a kidnapping investigation. Returning her home now would create complications for everyone involved. Daniel started crying on the other end of the line. What are you saying? What's going to happen to her? Your wife is going to start a new career in customer relations, Ray said calmly. She'll be helping other families work through situations similar to yours. Very rewarding work, and it allows her to stay safe while you focus on your recovery. Daniel was screaming now, begging them not to hurt me, promising he'd find the money somehow. Ray hung up without responding and turned back to his laptop. Over the next 3 days, they prepared me for my new position, with training sessions about loan procedures, interest calculations, and customer psychology. Mr. Park explained that my job would be calling the wives and family members of debtors who were behind on payments, using my own experience to convince them that cooperation was their best option. You'll be very effective, he said. No one understands the situation better than someone who's lived through it. They moved me to a different location, an apartment complex that looked normal from the outside, but was entirely occupied by people connected to Ray's organization. My neighbors included accountants who managed the financial records, drivers who handled collections, and administrative staff who processed loan applications. It was a complete ecosystem designed to look legitimate while hiding the true nature of the business operations. My apartment was comfortable but monitored. Cameras in every room, phone calls recorded, internet access limited to work-related websites. I was given a salary that was deposited into an account I couldn't access without supervision, and my daily schedule was managed by supervisors who called themselves team leaders. It was employment disguised as imprisonment, designed to keep me productive while eliminating any possibility of escape. The work itself was psychological torture. I spent 8 hours a day calling women whose husbands owed money to Ray's organization, explaining what would happen if payments weren't made on schedule. I used my own story as an example, describing how cooperation had led to a positive outcome for my family. The women I called were terrified, and I was the voice of their terror, making their nightmares seem reasonable and inevitable. Some of the women I spoke with had children, young mothers with babies, trying to protect their families while their husbands made the same destructive choices Daniel had made. I had to explain to them that their children's safety depended on their husband's financial responsibility, knowing that Ray's organization would follow through on those threats. Every call felt like I was becoming complicit in other people's suffering. Daniel continued calling the treatment center, trying to find ways to pay for my release. But every plan he developed was sabotaged by the ongoing media coverage and law enforcement investigation. The FBI had become involved, treating my disappearance as organized crime-related, which made it impossible for Daniel to negotiate directly with Ray's organization. He was trapped in treatment while I was trapped in this job, both of us prisoners of his gambling addiction. 3 months into my employment, I was given a promotion to Senior Customer Relations Specialist. This meant training new employees who were in situations similar to mine, people who'd been recruited after witnessing too much or becoming too involved in the organization's operations. I taught them how to use their trauma as a tool for manipulating other victims, passing on the psychological techniques Ray's organization had perfected over years of operation. One of my trainees was a young mother named Lisa, whose husband had defaulted on a loan after losing his job. She'd been kidnapped from a daycare center while picking up her daughter, and now she worked alongside me making threatening phone calls to other desperate families. It gets easier, I told her, hating myself for the lie. Eventually, you stop thinking about the people on the other end of the phone as real people. They become just voices and account numbers. The organization's business model was brilliant in its cruelty. They didn't just collect money from debtors, they collected people who could help them collect money from other debtors. Every kidnapping victim who survived became a potential employee, using their experience to make the threats more credible and the psychological pressure more effective. It was a self-perpetuating system that grew stronger with every family it destroyed. Daniel completed his treatment program and returned home to find reporters camped outside our house and FBI agents asking daily questions about my disappearance. He couldn't work because his employer had terminated him due to the criminal investigation, and he couldn't leave town because he was considered a person of interest in my kidnapping case. He was trapped in a nightmare of public scrutiny, while I was trapped in a nightmare of private collaboration. Ray eventually offered Daniel a deal. If he joined the organization as a collections agent, they would arrange for my rescue from the unnamed criminals who'd been holding me captive. Daniel would be reunited with his wife, the FBI investigation would be resolved, and both of us could start rebuilding our lives as employees of the business that had destroyed our marriage. The alternative was that I would remain missing indefinitely, and Daniel would eventually be charged with arranging my disappearance to avoid his gambling debts. The reunion was staged to look like a dramatic rescue. Kevin discovered my location and called police, who found me chained in an abandoned warehouse with a story about being held by mysterious criminals who'd fled when they realized law enforcement was closing in. Daniel was waiting at the hospital when they brought me in, and we embraced for the cameras while reporters documented our tearful reunion. But the real reunion happened later, in a conference room at Ray's headquarters, where Daniel and I signed employment contracts that would keep us both trapped in the organization indefinitely. We were given a house in the apartment complex, jobs that paid enough to live comfortably, and the knowledge that any attempt to leave or contact law enforcement would result in consequences for both of us and any future family members we might want to protect. 2 years later, Daniel and I work side by side in Ray's organization. He handles collections while I manage customer relations, and we've become two of their most effective employees because we understand both sides of the business intimately. We live in a house that's comfortable but monitored, have jobs that pay well but trap us permanently, and maintain a marriage that survived kidnapping but didn't survive the truth about what we've both become. Sometimes new employees ask us how we've stayed together after everything we've been through, and I tell them that shared trauma can either destroy a relationship or make it unbreakable. Daniel and I are unbreakable now, bound together by our mutual complicity in other people's suffering, and our mutual understanding that escape is impossible. We've learned that love can survive almost anything, including the knowledge that the person you love most has become someone you no longer recognize.